Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Now, I've been getting the question a lot in stream lately as to whether I'm preferring Holy or Discipline when it comes to keys, and I've been trying to do my best to play a good mixture of both. Now that we've had multiple weeks of Fortified and Tyrannical, I wanted to actually give some more like crystallized thoughts on the matter. When it comes to both the specs, I think that they're going to be pretty good when it comes to like endgame, end season, and it only is looking better with the slight changes that we're seeing. There's some like small things that are changing up for 10.1.5, namely adding like Void Summoner, which will provide a little bit more like off healing if you played like a heavy damage squid build with Disc. That being said, both of the specs are actually dealing pretty reasonable amounts of damage, with Holy being like 3 or 4k behind, and Disc, of course, staying a little bit ahead even when playing like a Blaze of Light build and not even playing a Squid build. But if you felt very comfortable in like high trash density dungeons, something like along the lines of like Freehold, I could absolutely see you playing something like Squid just to like min-max, destroy, chew through all the trash on something like a Fortified week. When it came to healing, I think this is probably where I'm seeing a bit of like the larger break between both of the specs. Holy does really well with a lot of this consistent damage that they'll see when you're able to stack up Prayer of Mending onto like a variety of allies. With the new 2-piece bonus, you're of course having extra Prayer of Mendings being cast. Your talent options, I'm always opting for like Benediction, right side Prayer of Mending, synergistic stuff. And with that, you can maintain Prayer of Mendings and then kind of refresh a lot of them by casting it on cooldown, even in some trash packs where there's not as much consistent damage. Oftentimes, I find there's enough group damage in every single trash pull to keep most of your Prayer of Mendings rolling, bouncing onto each other, and refreshing their duration, so that you can eventually be able to get into a boss fight that will actually consume all of those palm stacks. Been a lot of times when I was pugging and we'd have frequent deaths to just standing in garbage, you know, it starts destroying that ideal. But as you get into more optimized groups, you're working on your 20s, this really heavy Prayer of Mending build is an excellent way of sort of storing healing for later. And then it allows you to sort of draw upon it when you are in the highest output of encounters. Sometimes it's super simple, like it'll be like Khajiit and like Halls of Infusion, and then it'll just be super consistent damage all the time, and your Prayer of Mendings are bouncing all over the place, doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Other times, it's kind of difficult with things like Magma Tusk in Neltharis, where there's a large burst of AoE damage, your Prayer of Mendings start bouncing all over the place, then there's a lull, and then you can refresh your Prayer of Mendings, and then they start bouncing all over the place, and then there's a lull, right? And so going into those like high-low situations, the spec actually does reasonably well with a lot of the burst damage because the Prayer of Mendings will be bouncing when you actually need them. The challenge comes, I think, in being able to deliver the healing consistently enough to a variety of targets, because your AoE healing is very limited. Being able to have just Sanctify, weak Circle of Healing, things like that, even when I was experimenting with like Miracle Worker, like double Sanctify, double Serenity, didn't seem to be that great when you had to AoE heal large damage consistently. And unfortunately, my gear is already set up for rating right now, so it's very low on Mastery, or lower than I'd like with Mastery. I'm running somewhere around like 20-22%, and I find playing Lightweaver makes it very difficult to be able to just like whack-a-mole, flash heal, and heal all across the board. It's strong healing, but when you have low haste, it's very difficult to be able to actually deliver that level of healing that is required to your allies when everybody's taking very similar amounts of damage. That's probably my biggest struggle at the moment when doing like higher tyrannical dungeons for Holy Priest, is like being able to deliver the high output to a variety of targets when I don't have like near 30% haste or something, and I can just quickly blitz, whack-a-mole, flash heal, and heal everybody back to life. Disc, on the other hand, as much as you really love being able to have lots of haste, I've been running with the exact same set of gear and actually haven't been having those troubles when it comes to being able to large-scale AoE heal everybody. With the Foresight giving you cheaper radiances and instant cast radiances, being able to specifically find that moment in time where I know I have instant casts on hand, and then I'm able to either like pre-rapture, or occasionally on like very consistent damage fights, I can even use Renew to put out atonements onto all my allies, and then before they expire, then being able to cast those radiances to be able to get the healing value from my mastery, as little as I have in keys, of course, but still getting the mastery healing value, and then refreshing the atonements, and then going into another flurry of damage spells to be able to top off allies. I actually didn't find encounters like Khajiit to be that troublesome at all, because I was consistently being able to apply atonement, and I had all the mana in the world to be able to apply extra atonements when I needed to, and with more haste, that only gets easier. One of the big challenges comes when you need to like really burst heavy output, and you can sort of solve that problem by radiancing your way out of it, which of course is good, but can also have the risk that if you're just burning back-to-back radiance charges, you may not have much on the back burner for another 20 or 30 seconds before they regen. The other side of it is if you're... I've seen the mistake of some players trying to like flash shield their way out of problems like it's BFA, and you just can't do that these days. You need to be able to set yourself up for that incoming damage and be ready with your Shadow Covenant, with your Schism, with a Harsh Discipline Penance to top off allies. One of the biggest areas I've seen players having trouble with is something like Brackenhide Hollow's first boss on Tyrannical, where you immediately get dotted up around the horn, every player, and the longer that you wait the top players, the worse it gets, because it's just a lengthy bleed. And I saw some players talking about, like trying to flash heal their way out of problems, and you just can't do that. You need to be able to like pre-rapture in a pull like that, be able to spread around all the atonements beforehand and the shields beforehand, and then be ready with Shadow Covenant to instantly just slam damage to be able to top players as rapidly as the bleeds are applied. For like the second round that you might have, I tried to make sure I had things like the double Radiance procs from my 4 set at the ready, so I could even just Radiance my way out of the problems if I needed to, if I didn't for some reason have Shadow Covenant. But ideally, having, Shadow Covenant, Schism, all the damage that you could possibly have ready for those specific moments in time. I think some of the fights that I started struggling the most with Disc was those that really required like high movement and like high spread of players. Something like Harlan Sweet for the last boss of Freehold, where there's just damage all the time and players are running all over the place, and they may not necessarily be within the 30-yard range of one of your Radiance targets. And that is an incredibly challenging situation to be in. Probably one of the hardest fights I think that we have to experience in Season 2. And that one, some cases, just being able to like paint up one player and sort of like isolate them and then make sure everybody else close to you is in range of your atonements can help a lot. Since there are some lull periods, you can always cook up like Harsh Discipline so that you always are just kind of like holding on to a penance for healing purposes, and then you're able to hit it as you're dropping off some of your cannon barrages. Things like that help a lot. But largely, I found that Disc had the output and the resources that I needed to be able to stay on top of players, and it just found the challenge of like higher level keys that I need to hold resources, tee up resources, specifically for mechanics and specifically for the next wave of mechanics, which isn't really anything new if you've been playing Disc in Season 1. I did find in a lot of cases that even if I didn't have as much haste as I wanted, because I'm still progressing through the raid, we are 7 of 9, we should be 8 of 9 by the time you guys see this video, fingers crossed, that even though I didn't actually have the full spread of haste that I wanted access to, it felt a lot easier to be able to do higher level keys, higher level Tyrannical in particular, as Disc, because I'm constantly able to have output on everybody. I have near infinite mana, which is surprising that Disc has more mana and more mana efficiency than Holy in a lot of cases in dungeons, which is weird. And I was also able to just constantly slam Shadow Covenant on cooldown for damage, for healing, whatever it was. I never really had to sit back and worry about the timing for the spell, and I could just freely send it 24/7 without actually having to stress. So I think what my plan is going to be is still to be able to push as Holy and Disc, but I think when I'm first going into a lot of high healing check fights and a lot of high Tyrannical fights, I'll probably be leaning more towards Disc to start at the moment, just because of the lower haste that I have on hand, the easy way that Disc can sort of store up bursty output a little bit better compared to Holy, which, like I said, you could mess around with Miracle Worker a little bit. I didn't find as much success with it. You have Apotheosis to lean on, but when it comes to that burst output, you are quite a bit more limited, I think, than Disc, and that's usually one of the areas where I think that Disc is going to shine quite a bit more than Holy. So those are my thoughts at the moment. Let me know what you guys have been enjoying with Holy and Disc, and what sort of content you guys might be looking for Season 2 as we continue. Thank you for watching, guys. Thanks to our patrons who make this all possible, and I'll catch y'all next time.